Today's episode is a powerful one. I'm joined by Jason Ulaszek, a design leader, entrepreneur, and the founder of Yes We Cancer, an initiative tackling the unseen struggles families face during pediatric cancer. When Jason's daughter was diagnosed with leukemia at 2 years old, his family was thrown into chaos, not just medically, but in every aspect of life: finances, school, work, relationships. He quickly saw that while the healthcare system treats cancer, no one is currently responsible for or supporting what Jason is calling the whole family impact of the diagnosis. Through Yes We Cancer, Jason is working to change that, focusing especially on the first 30 days post-diagnosis when families are forced to make huge life decisions with little guidance. He's using design thinking, technology, and his real-life experience to fill in these gaps and make an unbearable process just a little less hard. This conversation is about resilience, systems change, and rethinking how we support families in crisis. Let's dive in. I'm your host, Katherine Jelinek, and this is the Expanders Podcast, presented by The Skinny Platform, the place for entrepreneurs with something to share and who want to be heard. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure today to introduce you to the brilliant Jason Ulaszek. He is the founder and chief design officer of Inzovu and founder of UX for Good, under which a current project that we will hear about today is Yes We Cancer. Welcome, Jason. Thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you very much for having me, Catherine. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So this audience does not know probably your family story, or maybe only a handful of individuals might, but talk to us about the family story behind Yes We Cancer.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me here today and to the opportunity to share a little bit with the audience and with folks. It's great to see you. So as a professional, I have a business and a consulting business, focuses on design, digital product and service design, Inzovu, as you mentioned, and also a nonprofit called UX for Good that mixes design and social impact. That's kind of on the professional side. I also teach usually once a year at DePaul University in their master's program as an adjunct professor. And that's the professional side. The personal side is I'm a husband and a dad to 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. Our boys are 13 and 11.
Wow.
So it was our first teenager in the house this past several months, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, Skibbity, Ohio, and Riz, and bruh, and all those terms becoming kind of part of our vernacular.
Oh, I'm totally clueless.
You wait.
I will.
Just wait. It's like, wait, say what? I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
And our middle guy is 11, so equally part of that, and our daughter is 8. The personal side of this, how this all kind of weaves in interesting ways, is my daughter, who's now 8, when she was 2.5, so basically in early 2019, she was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, ALL, B type, which if you know anything about cancer, at that point in time, I didn't know much about cancer at all.
Yeah, pretend we don't. I don't.
Yeah, right. I mean, friends and family members and folks you hear about go through different, challenges like cancer, whether that's a kind of a growth or a tumor, benign or a malignant, or a blood cancer, or any number of different types of things. There's a lot, but in pediatric cancer, especially in the blood cancers, ALL B type is fortunately the one that is the most frequent and the most frequently diagnosed, and the one that they have at least the most amount of research and the highest degree of success in. Success does not mean 100%, and there's still lots of risk and lots of personal situations that you just don't know until you go through it. But she was diagnosed in 2019, and to kind of put things in perspective, when they diagnose kids, it kind of like track them. So they know a bit of a treatment protocol, and her treatment overall plan was about 2.5 years. And in perspective, after that treatment is complete, people know about the ringing the bell part, and but there's still all these check-ins and things that happen periodically, and that will happen for the rest of her life. She is happy and healthy now, which is great, and we're a few years past the end of treatment and ringing the bell,
Wonderful.
gratefully. Not everybody is as obviously as lucky. So when she was diagnosed, though, thankfully my wife, who's a nurse, not an oncology nurse and doesn't work with cancer patients, but medically inclined, no, can like, oh, I heard of that, or I know that drug, or I get that, right? Thankfully, she, had that skill and ability, because what we were thrust into was this immediate onslaught of kind of the freak out stage, and thrust into learning how and what it's like to become a caregiver, in that sense, right? So everybody at some point in their lives are gonna be a caregiver to someone or something, or in some situation, right? Directly or indirectly. It's just the way it is.
Mhm.
But all of a sudden we found ourselves on this new journey, trying to make sense of it all, being equally parts mad at the world, freaking out, like, what does this mean? All these different things. You're immediately, from the moment of a doctor, a nurse, a social worker walk into the room and telling us that your daughter has leukemia. We're going to admit you right away in the hospital. You're just like hair on fire. I don't know what's going on. And walking from the clinic to it being admitted on the pediatric oncology
What
ward.
did you go in for? Like, how was this discovered?
We had a handful of weeks in a row had been kind of low energy, feeling down.
Mm,
We thought, young kids, uh, uh, constipated or just sick,
yeah.
just not feeling well. And we tried a number of things with our pediatrician until she said, we ought to draw her blood and test her blood, because she was just looking pale. And
Mm.
so her hemoglobin was really low. And the pediatrician suggested we go get some further blood tests. And so that's basically, went in just trying to understand what's going on. And then it was kind of a shock to the system.
Yeah.
Hearing
Understatement. Yeah.
those words. Yeah. Yeah. Our family, I mean, cancer is, so prevalent and amongst people.
Mm.
But, to give you kind of another interesting thread here, is that my wife's brother, who's a few years older than us, but not much, when he was 5 years old, was diagnosed with the exact same leukemia as our
Interesting.
daughter.
Hmm.
So, it's really interesting. As far as I know, and in talking to medical professionals, there aren't any kind of like links between that, but it's just kind of interesting, right? I don't know if to call it circumstantial or coincidence or what have you, but it's always an interesting piece of like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like,
Yeah.
really?
And there's no identifiable explanation for that yet.
No.
Yes. So, yes, we cancer kind of is it. You've created this out of the experience you've had and the giant ahas of what the huge gaps were in your experience.
Correct.
Give us like that
Yeah.
insight, like what happened, what was experienced for your family as you went through this
Yeah.
intense, totally unique journey that so many of us, if we're not, like you said, like if there's not an experience of cancer and having to caregive in that way, like you just don't even know.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, you're kind of thrust into this experience of becoming a caregiver, and there's not a whole lot that is there to support you becoming one. This is we'd like to describe this as um, welcome to the club that you never knew existed. Had you known had you known that that club existed, you'd never want to become a member, and you can never leave.
Yeah.
So you're thrust into this. There's no like welcome or orientation, so to speak. You're left to kind of on your own to sort that out. What we were experiencing were lots of people on the medical side who are there to help us attack the cancer. The first, in a blood cancer, there's between 65 and 70% of all pediatric cancers every year, of which there are about 17,000 diagnoses every year. But about 65 to 70% are all like blood related cancers. And so
Interesting. Okay.
um, uh, the point of saying that is that within blood related cancers, the goal is to really knock the cancer into remission within the first 30, 45, 60 days, right?
Wow.
And that's the point when you hit remission. And this is kind of the big misnomer that people don't really recognize typically in cancer diagnosis and treatment, is that the point is knock it into remission, and then you have all this treatment plan to still go through. It's not it's in remission, done, right? Like there's still a long tail for this around the treatment protocol to keep it into remission. And so that's what happens at that point. And what we experienced throughout the first, several months, especially up front, was that we had lots of questions.
Yeah.
And the thing about questions and understanding and frustrations and learning and big decisions, milestone kind of decisions, right?
Like what?
Does our insurance cover this? By the way, we had short-term healthcare insurance because it was too expensive through the exchange and everybody was healthy. And my wife didn't have insurance through her job.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a group insurance plan at
Right.
our business.
You're an
yet.
entrepreneur running your own business.
So I had 2.5, 3 months to figure out what was going to happen with our daughter and insurance.
Wow.
The first year of expenses, generally medical expenses, are somewhere around $1 million.
What?
For treatment. So put that into perspective.
And
Unless you have an extra $1 million sitting around,
right.
you really
That's
need
what's
insurance.
billed to insurance, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, billed
Usually. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, right. But short-term healthcare plans that renew every 6 months, right? Now she had a pre-existing condition, right? So, what I had questions about were, how in the world do I figure out insurance? How expensive is this? Because you would typically satisfy your deductible in a matter of a couple hours or an afternoon.
I bet. Yeah.
And oh my God, what do we do? And that was met with, really a gap, a first giant gap, Catherine. Like we would meet all these wonderful, well-intentioned nonprofits and individuals that would come into the clinic and like, we have a backpack and a blanket and some things to keep and occupy my daughter's time or our time, or here's a gas card or a meal card, or all those things are, well-intentioned, but none of them really get to the heart of many of these other challenges that families have. And so things like insurance, that's not anybody's problem to solve. The billing department at the clinic and the hospital didn't have answers. The social worker or the child life specialist didn't have answers. The doctor didn't have answers, right? The insurance company didn't have answers on what to do, right? Like, so that was kind of a big hurdle. And all I would continue to see is more organizations that had things that pass time and occupy our brain space to make us feel momentarily better, perhaps, or our kids better. And not answering some of these other questions. What do we do about school? What do we do about our kids? What do we do about, all these countless other things that you have to make decisions, pretty straightforward, right away, you're just kind of thrust into it. So I got curious and I got angry and curious. And when that happens for me, I start to I got to do something about it. And so I was teaching as an adjunct at that time, and I started bringing in pediatric cancer nonprofits into the classroom to create projects for our students, these master's students, so we could give back, because these organizations, I recognize, like, we're doing nice things, and we're very lucky and fortunate to financially make it through and are still making it through in other elements.
Mm-hmm.
Many others, countless others, are not.
Yeah.
Divorce, bankruptcies, people lose their homes, can't pay their car bills, somebody loses a job, challenges with other kids in the household, lots of other things. And none of those really, many people recognize that there are organizations and things that really kind of deal with this. These are gaps. The family experience is a big gap. And that's what I was finding as we, over the course of a few years and throughout Regan's treatment, I continued to bring in these nonprofits into the classroom to just try to understand this space and places
You
they
would
were in.
bring in the nonprofits that were like donating blankets and gift
All sorts
cards?
of stuff. And we would do
Okay.
projects with them to understand who is it that they are serving? What is it, the programs and services and things that they provide?
Mm-hmm.
And I just recognized that, like, even these small nonprofits are, while they're, doing some good things in the world for folks, um, people don't need more $20 Dunkin' Donut gift cards. They need like $2,000 to pay their mortgage or something, right? Or to pay their insurance deductible or
Right.
whatever it might be, right? So we don't need more of those. We have a lot of those. We need some of these other ones that reduce the stress
Yes.
and challenges overall for families as they move through one of the most challenging times of their lives. I started to see this clearer and clearer, and I was like, after we did 5 years worth of projects and 27 different projects with pediatric cancer nonprofits or cancer related nonprofits, and it was pretty clear that these gaps are just not being addressed. So I kind of started to think about what could we kind of do? Is there something I could do to, like,
Yeah.
it was frustrating, right?
And when you
So yeah, go
when
ahead.
you say, "Is there something I could do?" You're referring to in terms of addressing the whole family experience,
Correct.
the whole walk, the thing that no one else has been able or chosen to pick
Yeah,
up as their
yeah,
responsibility because it's a big enough responsibility to be too big.
yeah. Right. I mean, the we take a very medical patient first approach,
Mhm.
uh, you know, patient centered. And I get it. And I'm thankful. My
Yeah.
daughter was able to get through. We had some challenges, and we had great care team, medical team, etc. Um,
Hmm.
and but these types of challenges, they're not a social worker's challenge, problem, and responsibility. There's not enough social workers and child life specialists. First of all, it's
Mm.
completely underfunded as a profession. The doctors are doing the best they can with the time that they've got and focusing on the core issue, which is the cancer treatment. And so the billing department at the hospital, it's not their challenge to sort through all these, like, what do I do with my kids and what decisions do I have to make with the school, and you know so
Yeah.
it falls, right. It becomes kind of, really, they're big gaps, right. So it's the way I think is interesting to describe it is, the family gets cancer, the kids get chemo,
I'm just
right.
And what I feel like I continue to see as you describe this is definitely an iceberg where like everything that's being offered is hitting at the top of the iceberg, but what's needed is so big and below, and no one's diving in there. And there's, like you said, it's like talking about everything big for a family, like insurance covering medical costs, and then meeting the normal family needs and costs, which is now a new level of stress around mortgage and kids' schools and dropping kids off and the care and the attention to the other children and your marriage. Oh my God.
Yeah, you have to be, I think, partially insane to begin with to make it out, because otherwise you will. I mean, you're insane when you come out of it anyway. Um, and so we saw it was like these gaps, and I was like, okay, well, teaching another class and bringing in more pediatric cancer nonprofits, while that's a nice giving back and making these organizations more efficient, is not necessarily making them more it's not really addressing these gaps I'm seeing. So, in the past, well, not in the past, we have I started a nonprofit called UX for Good many years ago with a really great friend and co-founder, Jeff Leitner.
Love Jeff Leitner. Hello, Jeff Leitner.
Man,
Say your
shout out.
name.
That's right. That's right. And so he and I got together, and I was telling him the story of all this, and we decided to kick back up UX for Good. But the focus was different this time around, because this is not we had done some work in the past, kind of research, design, and innovation, and big ideas, and the structure of it was a bit more of like an event that would take place with designers and nonprofits around crazy social challenges, and the Grammys and Music Cares and the Dalai Lama Center and social emotional learning and the Kigali Genocide Memorial around the visitor experience there, et cetera, et cetera. And
so big and wonderful things.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Shine a light on it, I don't know if you won't. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do we do with this, right? Like, so.
Yeah. So what was the big difference? Because I'm hearing you're not going to just solve it in one day of bringing together some brilliant minds, because this thing has obviously not been touchable yet in terms of solving.
Correct. So this one was interesting. This work is interesting because we're kind of our own client.
Mm-hmm.
So, we got together and said, great, let's do something about this. And so that started, 2024 in thinking about, okay.
2024? That really only started last year?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Bravo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I mean, so we started Yes We Cancer, really, which is a project out of UX for Good, or some work that we're doing, initiative, whatever you want to call it at this point. I'm not getting hung up on labels. We had to kind of be our own client a bit, which is different for us because we had always worked with other organizations that were supporting, kind of helping address these social challenges. But
you know how to pick their brains, but when it's your brain to be picked, it's hard to be the picker and the brain.
There's not as far as we have ever been able to find, there's not an organization that is, focused on, the family's experience in moving through pediatric cancer, right? Like,
right.
I have not found anything like that ever around anywhere.
Can I just take a quick side moment?
Yeah.
The work you do through Nzovu and your natural, unique talents and gifts. Everyone listening, I met Jason because you were affiliated with the Junto Institute, and you taught the class on brand engineering, which for those in the Junto Institute, they would go through, map a customer journey. So one of your gifts is being able to be so insightful about the engineering of experience. And here it comes, everyone. That's just a little bit of background to understand about Jason. So now, in the context of Yes We Can, it makes a lot of sense, obviously, to bring this tremendous superpower to one of the greatest needs you've encountered in your life.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I think this is kind of like, I don't have much of an ego. In fact, I tried not to have any. And I just try to step up my self-deprecating humor most of the time. However, I do feel like this is like, those moments where you look back and it's like, that's kind of maybe my life's work, or maybe I need to focus on this. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I, as an experienced designer, we create experiences all the time, intentional experiences for all sorts of different types of corporations, clients, nonprofits, NGOs, et cetera. Right. But, it was clear to me that what we were experiencing was something that was a gap, right? And part of the larger system, right? And not designed at all.
Yeah.
We in 2019 we got a 3-ring binder with about 15 to 20 pages of paper that welcomed us into this new club of caregiver. And I don't even thank you, I guess. I'm not sure, but there were no
Mm.
answers and nothing about the questions in this thing, right, that we were given. And I was like, this is like,
Yeah. I'm
would
hearing
you imagine that if like
that.
you gave somebody a new car and it, a new EV, and it was a totally ill-designed dashboard, and nobody told you on how to start and drive the car?
Well, it's just a dearth of shared experiences is what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
right.
Like, there's nobody gathering the information that
Right.
is out there within
Yeah.
all the families who've already passed through this gauntlet, nobody owning it. So what have you learned? What are you doing now? Like,
Yeah. So we've
what's
gone
stood
through
out?
last year. We went through a bit of a process as we have. Like we convened families the first part of the year to help us understand some of the challenges that they faced.
Mhm.
We shared with them kind of our view of like we think there's a gap. Help us understand where do you think within that like we ought to dig in further. To your point about the iceberg, I think this is really important, Catherine. Like uh, when you ask families, tell us about your experience. What Tell us about your family's experience when you go through this. Everybody seems to define their experience through the medical lens, meaning
Interesting.
just like the tip of the iceberg is the medical treatment in the lens, because we would
Interesting.
hear stories about the nurse or couldn't get the port accessed, or we had a real challenge with this part of it. And we're like, we really kind of want to know a bit more about the things that are below the surface, like your relationship as partners, your relationship with your siblings, the siblings relationship, your
Jason, why?
job,
Why
because
weren't
we
they?
just don't have this language and a label for it, right?
Okay.
And so what we have found through rounds of research and interviewing families, and now we have some 60 plus families on a research panel that we've created over last year.
Great.
And so we've come up with this term called whole family impact.
Mhm.
And we think that by defining this and labeling the collection of elements around the experience that nobody seems to talk about, that this is kind of an analog would be PTSD or
Yes.
alternative energy, or a number of different things that you can think of that allow people to describe the experience and put a label on it and point at it.
Mhm.
Because without that, families only have, and I'll even broaden that, people only have the medical treatment label to call it, right? There's nothing that contains the entirety of the experience that people have, that all sits, so much of it sits below the surface of the water, right?
This is so interesting. It's almost like because we're only addressing the one part, that's the only part that our minds, our attention are focusing on, but our subconscious and obviously our feelings are going through the other things we're not even recognizing, addressing, giving them time. Nobody else is talking about it, so we're not thinking about it. We don't have time for it. The big
And it's
iceberg
nobody's
stays underneath.
responsibility, right?
Marriages explode. It's still felt. The repercussions are still getting felt,
Yeah,
but nobody's looking at it. Oh
yeah,
my God. And that one self doesn't even have the chance to see it because everything else is already so big.
yeah. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah. And so
That's
it's
brutal.
uh that has been a way we've been labeling it and talking about it and continue to do some research around it.
Hmm.
And where we've kind of landed over the course of the second part of the year, or the last quarter of the year of 2024, was so these things that are important, like finances and relationships and sibling dynamics and overall family dynamics and jobs and all this stuff, right? That's kind of below the surface, really, is our focus. We're not trying to be better medical, treatment providers or any like that. Is you know they got a track and there's stuff for that, right? But it's all this other stuff that we're trying to respond to. And it turns out that because there are so many pediatric cancer diagnoses through the year, and I mentioned about 65 to 70% are blood cancer related, with a goal of trying to create remission, kick cancer into remission within the first 30, 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
That it turns out through our research and reflection is that there are so many big decisions related to all that stuff below the surface, the other part of the iceberg, right?
Mm-hmm.
Around whole family impact that are made within that first period of time, or that
First
are
30 days as well?
yeah.
Wow.
So,
So
like,
the
what are you going to do with your kid? Well, you need
yeah.
to let the school know that your kid is no longer going to be in attendance or will miss a considerable amount of time. And what's the plan for your child? What's going to happen with the other kids? How are you communicating to your boss or your employer? What do you need to think about insurance? Like, you're just all these things are starting to become decisions that you're starting to make within that first window of time. Now, some of those might change throughout, but they're heavily influenced in that first span of time.
That is a big, intense first 30 days. It sounds like
Correct.
the focus of everybody's attention goes to the medical,
Yep.
understood as to why, and that obviously is very important. And then the fact that all these other things are getting navigated, negotiated. But it's like, it sounds like the blind leading the blind. Nobody with a flashlight is returned to come back to the beginning and lead someone else through, which
Yeah.
is what you're doing.
Yeah, and
But
there are people, and there are some programs around mentoring, and
hmm,
there's some ad hoc on the fly things that people do and reach
of
out, and
course.
there's a lot of community building people do, right? Like
Yeah.
you would, think about the Junto community, right?
Yeah.
Like, people have kept those relationships and created those and cultivated them over a period of time. This is kind of how you and I wound up
Yeah.
having conversation today, right? So, point being is that there's a lot of things that happen, and so we have an idea called the First 30, and where we're focusing our time and energy this year is creating a prototype and a pilot
Okay.
of an experience in which we can focus on the first portion of that journey
Mm.
around the whole family impact and around the family's experience as it relates to pediatric cancer,
Wow.
and using both design and technology to help in some of that ways. Some of
Do you
those
have any
things,
peeks into that
yeah.
changes?
I mean, places that we're experimenting right now, and we're going through kind of a little bit more research and some discovery specifically in that area now. But where we've started to prototype has been using some artificial intelligence and some technology. If you're familiar with agentive AI, this is like the next wave of artificial intelligence where you can provide the technology some agency, and you can empower it to take some actions
Okay.
for you. So here's just an example.
Mhm.
A family is diagnosed with a child of theirs has pediatric cancer. They have
Mm.
multiple siblings. That girl is in third grade. Okay, we know all this information. We know the type of cancer that she has and what treatment plan might be like. And we know, because it's tracked and there's a protocol that's used across many hospitals, research protocol for a treatment, that X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And that in the first 30 days, we need to try to knock it into remission. Here are things that families have to deal with or starting to ask questions about, one of which is school. So we can do some level of onboarding for that family and provide them with some insight about how to approach school. And what agentive technology, AI, starts to do is, some level of predictability in that case, where we can say, here's what we suggest, writing a letter or an email to the school. And in fact, these are the things that you should probably mention to them, right? And we've drafted the letter for
Mm.
you.
There you go. Save me time and
w-
energy.
would you like us to send it?
Wow, there you go. Okay, so we keep hearing about AI agents
Yeah.
and the future of AI and the fact that none of us have them yet, but we hear the idea that someday we'll all have a doppelganger that can write our emails at night and stuff like
An
that.
assistant, right? It's
And-
a
Right.
co-pilot, if you will,
But
right?
this opportunity and leveraging that technology early or beginning to use it now in this way, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not a there are plenty of people focusing on patient and billing and the medical side of things. Like again, those are all like tip of the iceberg sort of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is the stuff like that families are continuously weighed down on,
Yeah.
and you have to get to because life is not stopping. And you start to make a lot of decisions, at least initially during the first 30 to 45 or so days
Hmm.
that set you on the course for the treatment journey, that are not that are influenced by medical treatment and the diagnosis clearly, but that just aren't supported. Like nobody's, another example in all this would be, I mentioned all these well-intentioned nonprofits who you meet, right? And everybody, wants to know your story, wants to get to know you. How can we help? And then, like, they say, "Hey, we've got $250 we can give you," or we give out grants of $5,000 or whatever. And everybody has their own application. This is kind of like, how would you start to use some of the what you know and technology to act on your behalf to some degree, right? So that you don't have to fill out 15 applications or jump through a ton of hoops to verify that your daughter has cancer and that you're in a position and would really benefit from having $5,000 to pay your mortgage and car payments or whatever it might be, right? So there's
That's
so much inefficiencies in amongst all these things and stuff that, even large nonprofits who have the means to provide support in these ways, there's so much just wasted time, money, energy, and hoops that people have to jump through, and it's like yet another thing on top of having to deal with how to become a caregiver and support your child.
Yeah, it's just the intensity is unimaginable. And so the pilots of the first 30-day program, when is this beginning and where is it beginning?
We're just in the planning stage, as we were kind of chatting earlier.
Cool.
We're just laying out the plan for the year and how we're going to involve families along the way, and what other kind of partnerships we might need to support it, and that sort of stuff too. So early stages of this year, but that's the goal for this year, which is to say that all this work has further refined our nonprofit and how we move through helping to tackle social challenges. And I'm really excited about that. I think we were talking earlier about kind of a sense of growth and maturity. This
Yes.
is kind of the next stage for that, and the next stage for design and social impact in my purview. It's not we lived in a time of technology and design hackathons and all sorts of, like, that's not, those sometimes can do more bad than good, to be quite
Hmm.
honest. Like, these problems that we face and where design can be helpful are systemic. Um, it's not a create a website or an app or something and then walk away. Like, there's there's a lot to be done, and it has a variety of different audiences and partners and things that have to happen. It really is systems thinking and systems design, broadly saying the word system, that I think where design is heading,
Yeah.
and where that's where lies a lot of the experiences that you kind of referenced and we've been talking about.
Yeah, I see that you're connecting these different ecosystems and experiences and making things more nimble and
Hmm.
challenging, especially even the ways that nonprofits operate
Yeah,
to
I
some
mean,
degree.
I just I just want to make it all suck less.
Yes. What a goal.
I mean, there are things that are like, you don't have to do it. Why are you doing it this way? It doesn't have to be this way,
Yeah.
right? Like if I can help chip away at it or just make it suck a little less, awesome.
Yes.
I'm not a oncologist or a cancer researcher. I'm not going to cure cancer. No.
Well, there's others who are trying to do that,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
everyone
absolutely.
is
That's why I was
not
saying
looking at this.
absolutely, right? But that's part of the system, right? Like
Yeah.
we want to get rid of cancer. Well, we need medical researchers and we need investment to happen in funding for all those things. I mean, don't get me started on the last time a drug was created for pediatric cancer, years and years and years, decades ago.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and so it's vastly underfunded.
Mm.
But even when it is somewhat funded, it is underfunded to my point. But that's part of the system, right? Like in order to get rid of cancer, you have to get rid of the disease. You also have to get rid of it being a cancer on other things.
On the family, the overall
Yeah,
impact.
absolutely. Right. So
Totally.
you have to have all of that if you're really going to try to attack the overall challenge. So we're trying to do what we think we have the ability to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is that other stuff that's below the iceberg.
I like that. So how can we help you? How can individuals or organizations help you help this
Yeah.
suck less? Like what can be actually
You
done
can,
by people at this point?
the easiest way is donate to the cause.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go out to either uxforgood.org or yeswecancer.com and you can donate, make a financial contribution.
And what are those being used for right now, like in 2024, early 2024?
Yeah. So for this year, all those funds
Or
go to
25, excuse
yeah,
me. What year are
2025.
we in?
So all those funds go to UX for Good and are earmarked towards Yes We Cancer. And those funds go towards, the development, the research and development of the work that we're doing. We bring in volunteers and hire people and to chip away directly at the challenge and to help build the experience that we move through with families, and eventually the prototype and pilot for the year. So that's probably I'd say the most direct way,
Mm-hmm.
is to make a charitable contribution. But we're also looking for other partners who might have a piece of this. So in the entrepreneur community, folks who are looking to make, if they have a foundation, a grant, or if they are, a content expert or a marketing expert or a technology expert, those types of
Mm-hmm.
deep levels of expertise. We're talking with a variety of folks how we might be able to leverage their skills in different ways
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah, and I'd like to put the call out to so many are brilliant systems thinkers and ecosystem builders, and if they get a chance to listen to this, could easily see how this is a systemic problem, an ecosystem to be the whole, like you
Yeah.
said in the name, the whole family impact to be considered. So those who like to think like that realize that this is very worthy of time, effort, energy, connection,
The bigger
financial.
and the bolder, the better.
Yes. And I'm glad. But so some of us, Jason, here's my closing appreciation to just shine a little light. Yes, fine. I know I might make you squirm, but just sit in it for a second. To be bold enough to take up the whole. It's hard is way beyond not the right word. Like it's why people don't decide to address things when the iceberg is so big. And yet it only begins when there's people who are ready to turn and look at it to start, which is your research, to begin to understand how big are we dealing with? What's the size of this? Let's measure the dimensions of this iceberg. How can we now avoid it? but just like an appreciation for turning towards and being the first to say this is a whole, rather than just leaving it to be the deep unknown.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. It's definitely been, one of those experiences personally and professionally that it's, going through this journey personally, it is, if anybody out there or you, Catherine, anybody's ever had PTSD, you definitely, when you come out the other side, if you're, I'll say lucky, fortunate to come out the other side, it doesn't end. This is the work that you have to do as a family, as a caregiver, doesn't end when the bell rings. It's now when you start to pick up the pieces and focus on all those other things below the surface of the water, the bottom of the iceberg, right? And it's hard, man. I think part of this is cathartic for me, right? Like it's also exciting because I get to blend my personal experience and reflect on that with others in the community with my professional abilities. And if I can do some good in the world, great. Right. And so it's really been this really wonderful moment personally and professionally for me to kind of blend both some success on my consulting kind of side of business with the social impact and nonprofit. And I'm just excited about this year and kind of what's to come. I don't have all the answers, definitely not. But we'll go figure it out.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there too is like when we were talking to everyone before pressing record, you were sharing, Jason, about how it's not just like this over there, this over here, things are interwoven. So you're not only like looking at the whole, but you are whole. Like you are a whole person interconnected without hat here, hat there.
It's right. It's a challenge. I mean, I'm sure building my consulting business was the first time entrepreneurial experience for me. It continues to be, and has been really rewarding, satisfying, exciting, great learning experience. But I've been over my career, have been in many places where you have lots of pieces that you're doing, right? You tell a story that connects them. But sometimes you feel like it's part of my story, but it doesn't really, there's not really this connection, right? Like, and so I really feel like for me personally and professionally, like there's a really strong connection now. Will it always be the case? I have no idea, but at least in the moment, I'm trying to soak it in and see how I can, push and pull things across all of it.
Well, may the connection you feel be reflected in the work you continue to do. That's exciting. We look forward to having this be posted, sharing this, and then please continue to keep me posted because I'm really eager to hear about, especially your pilot, how 2025 goes. And I'd love to report back for our listening audience. So
yeah,
love to
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, Catherine. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story, Jason. Thanks, everyone. Check in next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Expanders Podcast, presented by The Skinny Platform. You can catch more episodes and be notified of newly released episodes by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or subscribing on YouTube. For more information on the Expanders Podcast and The Skinny Platform, visit our website, www.theskinnyplatform.com.